Hey, YouTubers, Tasman here, bringing you another episode of Learn JavaScript with Foundry VTT. And I was looking at my notes for how I was going to teach the async and await, and I could not remember what the heck. I did that a month earlier during Christmas break, and I could not remember what it was. So I've kind of, I also, while I was looking, found that I missed some things in both callbacks and in promises, because one thing to really understand is it's an evolution. JavaScript started with callbacks to try and alleviate what's called callback hell. They introduced promises. And then promises were kind of complex as well. And so they did async and await, which technically also uses promises as well. And I don't feel that I was showing a very good evolution from one to the other, making it kind of flow to make sense. So I'm going to redo. I'm going to leave the ones up in case there's other information in those that maybe you might glean that is useful. But we're kind of going to have a updated version or a redo version of callbacks and promises, and then we're going to jump into async and await. And I've re-scripted everything that I wanted to do and made sure that one was flowing from one to the other, so it made a little more sense, at least I hope. So, and then the other thing I also did was in our manage modules here, we were using macro, we were using the improved macro editor. It didn't seem that improved to me. Maybe they'll make more improvements to it, but like it didn't even have line numbers, even though in acelib we told it, yes, absolutely show line numbers. So I've reverted back just to the general macro editor. Not a big deal at all. As you can see, we're in Foundry Virtual Tabletop version 10 still and build 291, which I think is the same one I've been since we've done callbacks, maybe even objects. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I did create, I've emptied out what our callbacks was, so it's a blank one, promises is a blank one, and these two are blank ones as well. And to kind of, there's a whole lot of typing, and as you know, I'm a very slow typer, so some of the bigger things that aren't as important, I'm just going to kind of copy and paste, such as some big comments that really explain what's going on with the topic that we're dealing with, and then our base object that I'm using for this thing. And then I'll try and type out the other stuff. It's not going to make the most sense or logical sense. I mean, it'll make sense what we're doing, but the logical sense of why we would be doing it this way is not there. To me, it seems like the best way would be to use an analogy of a restaurant with all of these, or something like that, and the preparation of food and how one thing is dependent on the other completing and stuff like that. However, we're gonna try and go through it anyway. So I'm gonna hit F12 so we get up our little console window, and then come over here to callbacks, which is blank, but it does have already our template in it. So let's go ahead and begin, and just kind of a repass of why we even need callbacks, promises, async and await is because JavaScript is a synchronous language. And what this means, if you don't remember, is basically, hopefully this is bright enough you can see it when it's a comment. I don't remember if it was. All right, so we'll hit enter there. Oh, yeah, that's fine. So I don't know how well you can see this, but this is kind of the verbiage I came up with for this. So synchronous means it executes one line at a time, and I think I've kind of pounded that one into the ground enough. It works from top to bottom. Each line is dependent on the successful completion of the previous line, and it's also known as single-threaded. So if you're thinking of the process being a thread, it's just a single one, and it has to work its way down that thread. Now, asynchronous, which is async, the lines can be run in parallel. So if you think of kind of a like a not a marathon, but like a track and field race, you have all your runners starting at the same time, and it's not dependent on anyone completing the run before the next one. So as you can see here, it's kind of bad because of, here, let's do this real quick, just so we can see this a little better. So lines can run in parallel, not necessarily needing the previous one to complete successfully before the next one starts, and it's also known as multi-threaded. So if you do think of kind of like a relay race or something like that, where you have the multiple lanes and the runners running around in the circle, that's kind of what this is talking about, is all of them start at the same time, or they could start at different times, and they could all finish at different times, or they could start at the same time. So this is where we get our first thing called callbacks. And basically, a callback is a function nested in another function, or a function calling a function. And we kind of talked about that with the set timeout function, which is a callback function that uses a function, it executes a function at a set timeout, which is technically simulating a callback in that sense. So for this, I was thinking, well, I can't think of any D&D way of doing a recipe, and I was thinking a lot, how to make a health potion or something like that. But I decided I would just do maybe the process of creating a character. And so for this, I've created an object, and we'll go ahead and just throw it in here. Control C and Control V, like so. So we have a character, right, that we're creating, and this is an object. So for a character, you have their race, you have their class, you have the background, you have the attributes, and what I'm using this for mostly is the primary attribute. Really, we're not even using very much of this. We're using the exact same thing every time, but I wanted to just kind of have an object for the fun of it. If you're a caster, then there might be spells, cantrips, first level spells, something like that. If you're melee or even a caster, you might have a staff or a crossbow, a sword, bow, something like that. You have your armor, and you have your gear. So this is what we're going to use throughout all of these examples that we're doing, is kind of this building a character. Oh, that was a bad move. Hold on, hit F12 again, make it so I can see the little thing. That way I can make it the right size. There we go. So anyway, that's what we're going to do here, is just use this. So let's go ahead and begin with creating our PC function, which will be our callback function. Technically, it's just a function with the callback function within it. So we're going to go const, and we're going to call it PC because that's what we're building as a player character. And we're going to say functi function, and right now we'll just leave that blank and just do it like that. Now, this is as we've talked before, this is a function expression. We're actually assigning the variable PC to this entire function, which is a unique thing pretty much, as far as I know, to Java or JavaScript. So of course, because we're declaring it here, we're definitely going to need to actually call it at some point. So we're going to go ahead and say PC, and we're going to call our function from there. So I've already figured out what I wanted for this. So we're going to make basically an elf wizard. So we're going to want array element 0 for race. We're going to want 1 for that. Then I decided on having it be a noble, and the primary stat will be intelligence, right? So for this, that means we're going to want to pass these into our functions. So we're going to say 0, comma, 1, comma, 0, comma, oops, I did a space, comma, 4. And we're also going to pass in another function that will do basically our shopping. It's going to let us do our gear. So we're going to actually pass in a whole function, and we're just going to call this equipment. E-Q-U-I-P, equipment like so. So because we have that here, we definitely need to have our receiving end, and we need to declare variables for those things. So we're just going to use, we could use the exact same name as, you know, what they are here, race, class, or whatever. I'm just going to use the letter because I think it's easier. So we're just going to do R for race, C for class, B for background, and A for attribute. And then just to keep it less confusing, we could also call our function equipment, but we're going to call it shop just to make it so it's clear that this is only existing inside this function. In other words, it might kind of seem like it's the exact same one we're calling out here. So we're going to call this shop because we're going to go to the shop, right? So obviously we're going to need a function called equipment because we're going to pass said function into our main function. So we're going to do another function expression. We're going to do const EQUIP equipment and equals FUNCTION. Do that. And this one doesn't need to have anything passed into it. All right, so now we kind of have our skeleton version of what we want. We have our main call to our function. We're passing this second function into it so that it will actually be able to be executed within inside of that one. And then we're going to have a bunch of set timeouts to simulate, oh, this is the time it took me to, you know, flip through and figure out what I wanted and write it down on the sheet for our different components for our race, class, background, primary attribute, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do to speed this up, because we're already at 12 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and do the race, class, and attribute parts just because we've already gone over the set timeout. I'm going to put them here. I'll explain how these are working. In fact, I might do this again just so we can see them. So here you can see we have set timeout function. This is the opening brace. There's the closing brace. Inside it, the first parameter that we, oops, I'm trying to move something that I shouldn't be. So our first piece here is the function. Now this could be, we're actually creating an anonymous function. Technically, we don't need to do that. This is just kind of drill into your head that yes, this is a function. Console.log is an actual function. So we could actually get away with even just doing it without creating a function, right? That's not it, it's right there. So we could do it that way if we want, just to help, you know, build up good habits or whatever. Maybe not even good habits, but to have the recollection or whatever that it is a function. I'm actually going to keep the rest of them doing a function. So as we've discussed in our last one where I was showing this, what this is going to do right here is basically it's going to start this set timeout function, and basically 1 second after this function runs, it will go ahead and run this race function, right? This console log. And we know it's 1 second because 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. 2,000 milliseconds is 2 seconds, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down so it's less nice looking, I guess. And we're going to go ahead and, oh, I actually did pretty good that time. We're going to go ahead and run this, and it should, I don't think we'll get any errors. So let's go ahead and run this, and you'll see, there we go, 1 second later, 2 seconds later, 3 seconds later. Technically, they're 1 second because each of these are firing off in their milliseconds based off of when this is called or when the actual main function they're in is. So it's not that this is going to go off 2 seconds after this one. This is going to go off 2 seconds after this is executed. This is going to go 1 second after this is executed. This is going to go 3 seconds after this is executed. Now this can get really confusing, by the way, because like if I want something down here to display at a certain time, it gets really finicky because I'm messing with different times here. So getting it to actually show up where I want it can be quite tricky because this is all going to execute as we've discussed. So the last part in this guy that we wanted to do, I really don't like it not being nice lines like that. The last thing we're going to do is do our final one, and this is going to be our primary attribute, and it's going to call our shop function, which is being passed into this, right? So if we come here, we hit enter here, hit V, you can see here, oops, I didn't copy it. Control Z. Let's go ahead and hit copy and paste. So this is pretty much exactly the same thing, but I kind of spaced it a little better so you can actually see. In this case, we couldn't do this with just a single line type function because we need to actually have multiple lines be called, and that's why I'm doing this. Not that this is the best way to do this type of thing, but as you can see here, we're going to console log that the primary attribute was selected, and we're going to pass it the A, and then we're going to call our shop. Now here, down here, you can see equipment. We're not calling equipment, we're passing equipment. We're passing an entire function as a parameter, and that's what shop is. But here we're actually calling shop, so this, when it runs, will actually go and do the equipment because technically its real name is equipment. So don't let that be confusing to you because it's not actually jumping out and going to this equipment. This entire, everything that we're going to have in here will actually be in here. So as far as JavaScript is looking, this is just one giant line of code because it's already gone through the first pass and kind of parsed everything and put things where they need to belong and all that stuff. So this will be 4 seconds after the PC is actually being called. So if we run this, I'm going to make it nice and small, hit F12. So if we run this again, now you'll actually see that there's 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and technically it went into our next function, but there's nothing in there, so it returned, went out of the first function because it lost scope, and continued on the next line, which ended the main and exited the whole function or the macro that we're creating. Hopefully that's not too confusing. All right, so now what we're going to do is inside our shop function, or our equipment function, we're going to actually just add a bunch of, we're kind of going to do this exact same thing here, but one will be dependent upon the other one completing. So when you're looking at this, this is all based off, because it's its own set timeout, this is based off when PC was called, right? This one's based off when PC was called. This one's based off when PC is called. And this one right here is based off when PC is called. But you can also do what's called function chaining, or the callback function chaining, or whatever. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to actually call timeout within timeout within timeout. And it's going to look really ugly. I'm just going to paste it because this will take me forever to type. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here and then try and fix any spacing issues. It looks like maybe very few, if any, just to there. We'll just do a shift tab to back it up one, and I think that's good. So here you can see what we're doing is we're doing our set timeout. Now instead of doing it as a regular function, we're actually doing this as an arrow function, because you can do an arrow function. The one thing you can't do in the set timeout is actually do a function expression, from what I remember. So anyway, here we're doing an anonymous function or an arrow function, and you can see that this arrow function for this one actually closes here, and you can see that it's going to finish in half a second. Now, because we're calling a set timeout within a set timeout within a set timeout within a set timeout, these, unlike this one that's based off of everything based off of the seconds from when that was called, these will actually be called based off of the time that the previous one was called. So when this runs, because it's asynchronous, or synchronous, sorry, it's going to output let's go shopping almost immediately. Then we have this section right here, which is going to launch 2 seconds. The next one will be 1 second, 2 seconds, and then 3 seconds. So here we'll actually be able to see a difference in time. And what you can see we're doing here is, all right, we'll first get our spells. And I just do the whole thing. I could have, had to do one spell, one spell, one spell, and really make this callback hell look like hell. But I think that would take too long. And the reason they call us callback hell is because you might have a ginormous list. We're only doing, what, 5 here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think. But you could actually have this be really, really big. And then it gets kind of confusing as, oh, wait, what was the seconds on this one? And so on and so forth. So anyway, here you can see we're doing our set timeout. This one, I believe, was the 2 seconds, then 1 second, 2 seconds, and 3 seconds, right? So it's going to wait after this completes. Basically 2 seconds after that completes, we will see the spells appear. And then 1 second after the spells appear, we will see the weapons appear. 2 seconds after the weapons appear, we will see the armor appear. And finally, 3 seconds after the armor appears, we will see the gear appear. Now, like I said, this does not really make any logical sense as far as why on earth would I do it this way. It's just for demonstration. So bear with me as you would be thinking, why on earth would I do this and have this take 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so on and so forth. It's just for the example. So let's go ahead and run it. We'll go ahead and make this a little bigger and clear it, and then we'll run it. So you'll see we have the 1, then 1 second later, 1 second later, 1 second later. Now we have our 2 seconds after that one, 1 second, 2 seconds, and finally our 3 seconds. And like I said, with timeouts, things down here are actually running at their own speed. Because what the program is actually doing is it's saying, okay, I have a timeout. I need to create a checker or whatever that's 1 second, right? 1,000 milliseconds. And then it continues on. And then it hits this one. Oh, this one's 2,000 milliseconds, 3,000. But it's actually running through the code and getting all the way back here before half this stuff is even displayed. And I can show that by doing console.log. We'll do a console log down here and say, what should we say? How about done with all that confusing function stuff? exclamation point, like so. All right, so when we do this, you'll actually see this console log come up when all this function mess and callback hell has actually finished running, but those callbacks are still waiting. So let's go ahead, clear this, and there you go. You can see right after that first elf was called, it's done. It's actually gone through everything. Everything is set in timers now, and it is done and finished with what it wants to do. So you can see that that even though I have these callbacks and stuff, it's kind of turning it into multi-thread, because even though, you know, this started first, this finished first, right? And then this comes in finishing all its different stuff at its own times. I hope that makes sense, because it's really kind of hard to explain. So I think that's good enough. I think that is what I wanted to cover with callbacks. What I didn't actually cover in my previous one was kind of how you can chain these callbacks together by doing a callback with set timeout and other callback functions, doing those within an actual function and just kind of have them nested like that. So hopefully that is as clear as it can possibly be. In the next episode, we will definitely go look at actual promises and hopefully make some sense of that. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below. Aside from that, comment, like, and subscribe. Follow me. Oh, and click the notification bell. I always forget that, and that's actually very important. Click that notification bell so you'll know when I do upload. Aside from that, though, follow me on Twitter. Check out my Discord and my other channels. Tell other people about my channel. Have them check it out. If they like what they see, they can sub, and we'll grow the channel. And, you know, that is it, my friends. Until next time, I'll be seeing you later. Bye.